In this video we're going to build this greenhouse, but since it's already there, I guess we're gonna have to rewind a little bit.
So the greenhouse we're going to build comes in a kit and is from a local supplier here in Portugal. And we've decided to build it right here, close to our gardens and food forests. The first thing we have to do is to replace this shrub to the swale. They don't transplant really well, so I hope it'll survive here. It's a great nitrogen fixing shrub native to this area and the bees love them. Now that we've cleared the space, it's time to measure out the distances of where the greenhouse will come. We quickly realized that between the highest and lowest point of this location, there's about a 40 centimeter difference. So let the digging begin. We started removing the soil one wheelbarrow at a time. After we dug out the first layer of soil, it was time to start making everything level. Turns out, leveling the ground took a bit of elbow grease and a lot of patience, but we got there in the end. At one point we had to remove a rock and suddenly water started to flow out of the ground.
So while we were digging, suddenly a lot of water came rushing in. It did rain a lot, so the groundwater must be quite high right now. But it's fun to see.
It might be fun to see, but it's not really ideal right where you want your greenhouse. So we'll need to dig a proper drainage trench to ensure that the water can easily flow away from the structure. As we were finishing to make everything ground level, it was time for the next step. These are pre-made concrete footers, in which the base poles of the greenhouse have been put. First, we lay out the footers roughly where they need to go. Next, we use the tape measure to determine the precise locations for digging the holes to place them in. Once that was done, it was time to start digging. Again. After 2 days of digging, I was pretty much over it. But the bulk of the hard work was behind us and the first parts of the greenhouse were finally in place. The next morning, after we woke up, we realized that a lot of water had accumulated from the hole. So I had to quickly dig a trench to drain all the water before we could continue. After we had widened up the space, it was finally time for the fun part. Building the greenhouse structure. At this point, it's much like Lego. If you've measured everything correctly, it's just a matter of connecting all the bits and pieces. Unfortunately, I didn't measure everything correctly, since I had to dig out a tiny bit of soil to fit the frame of the door. But once that was done, the first part of the greenhouse was standing. Now it was time for the second, the third, and the fourth. And we connected everything together with a metal bar, some bolts and nuts. Throughout the construction we keep checking if everything is water level. At this stage it's still quite easy to make small adjustments where needed. Once everything was level, we continued with the remaining bar to connect the structure together. Now that most pieces are connected together, the main skeleton of the greenhouse is finally standing. With the main frame in place, it's time to fill back the holes. And as you can see, we still have water seeping out of the ground, but we'll sort that out later. For now, we're moving on to the diagonal bracing part of the build. These braces are key for stability and they're going to keep the greenhouse standing strong against wind and weather. With the bracing in place, the structure is really coming along nicely. The next thing on our list is to add the sidebars. They're going to hold the rolling windows that let us open up the sides of the greenhouse. Given how much sun and heat we get around here, being able to air out the inside is pretty important. To hook up these sidebars, we're using simple rings that wrap right around the main pole. Then we just tighten them up with bolts and nuts. It's straightforward but super effective, keeping everything snug and secure. Now we can easily slide the bar into place, measure out the exact height it needs to be at, and then tighten it up. It's as simple as that. A few measurements, a couple of turns, and a structure is one step closer to being greenhouse ready. Now that the main frame of the greenhouse is done, it's time for the next exciting part, digging. I've got to say, at this point, the thought of facing even more digging was definitely not high on my list of exciting things to do. But hey, a little more dirt under the nails can't hurt, right? The next morning it was time to tackle the greenhouse covering. This is a job best done on a calm day. That plastic can literally turn into a parachute with just a bit of wind. For a small greenhouse like this one, you can simply place the tarp in the trench and then slowly pull it from one side to another. Once we reached the other side, we made sure there was enough overlap on both ends before temporarily securing it to the railing. With the main sheet of plastic now installed, we need to hurry up and get all the front sides in place. While we were doing this, we suddenly had a decent shower and the wind was getting stronger. So we needed to hurry up as the plastic started moving a lot. We decided to quickly put a couple of shovels of soil on the tarp on either side to keep it down in place. Once that was done, it was time to continue with the remaining plastic on front. In case you're curious about how we get the plastic attached to the greenhouse, it's pretty straightforward. Think of it as a click system. You've got the railings in place, then you lay the plastic over it, and as last you hammer these long white clips that slide right into the railing. Personally, I'm not the biggest fan of this click system. On past greenhouses I've always worked with wiggle wire, and I find that it's not just stronger but also easier to work with. That said, this click system we're using now will get the job done. Now that the bottom plastic is in place, it's time to cut the sides of the window. This loosens up the bottom section that we now have to pull up and attach to the bottom rail. After attaching the bottom plastic, we can fill the trenches back up and cut off any excess plastic. With the trenches filled back in, we're going to loosen the clips along the side to make a small incision in the plastic. This will allow us to attach a bar to it that will become our rolling side window, making it easy to open and close whenever we need to. Next up, we tackle attaching the front sides of the greenhouse right to the inside of the door. It's pretty straightforward. We just take off the strip they pre-installed on the door, wrap the plastic tightly around the frame, and then put the strip back on to secure it. This process we follow until all sides are neatly attached, as well as the windows. Now that this is done, I quickly hammer in some additional poles that will keep the door frame in place. Just as the evening darkness began to set in, we managed to get the first pre-made door installed on the greenhouse. It was a race against time, but we made it.
Are you sure?
The next morning we straight away continued where we left off and started finishing the door. I simply pre-drill a couple of holes and attach the lock to it.
Yes, it's moving!
finalize it, we add a hook to the corner post that will allow us to block the door when it's open.
To close it, keep the door open. Nice.
With the doors now
That's
in place,
nice.
we're moving on to the windows. They're pretty straightforward to attach. Just a matter of securing them to the frame with some simple bolts. Once they were in place, I attached a chain on the bottom and top of the window that will allow us to open and close it as needed.
Let's open the windows, girls.
The next morning it was time to start finishing the last bits and pieces, starting with the handle of the window bar. Once the bar was done, it was time to attach it to the plastic. Here we're taking extra care to ensure everything is perfectly aligned in the middle. We then roll the plastic around once and use simple clips to keep everything securely in place. Now it's time to put those windows to the test and see if they're working as they should.
That's it.
No way.
With the greenhouse fully covered and all set up, we move on to filling any gaps with soil and covering the whole area with a weed barrier. This is just a temporary measure to keep things neat and tidy until we're ready to dive into the next steps. And there you have it. After all that work, the greenhouse is finally standing. And honestly, it's a bit surreal. Now we're getting ready to grow our own trees for the food forest and kickstart our veggies. There's still a bunch more to do, like building the interior and sorting out the landscaping.
But that we will cover in the coming videos. I hope you've enjoyed following along with this part of the journey. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.